Aloha, and welcome back to America Finding Its Way on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today on the show, we'll be discussing the possibility of sea changes in America with our guests, Tim Apicella, Stephanie Dalton, Winston Welch. Welcome, Tim, Stephanie, and Winston, to this great discussion. Let's start with you, Tim. You know, we have so many things that are happening that suggest that maybe there are changes. We know there are changes anyway. There's nothing so constant as change. Change is constant. And clearly, whether we're in a time now, an inflection point, where we can actually see America changing. And there's various possibilities there in national political attitudes, in what's going on in Congress in terms of negotiated possibilities there, possibility of corporations taking stands on political issues, the concerns of voters who have been scammed, as we discussed yesterday, by Republican fundraising, and of course, gun control. There seems to be, a kind of change in the community, in the country, about these things. It's not complete yet, and it may tilt the wrong way, but at least these things are up for change. What do you think, Tim?
Well, the sea change is forever ongoing. Let's look at gun control. And when President Reagan was shot by Hinckley, the Brady Bill became a reality and became law, limiting, automatic weapons. That was a short-lived lifespan of I thought was a sensible gun control element, but it was expired. The law became a sunset clause in the law and expired, and here we are again with AR-15s and semi-automatic rifles. And the bottom line is we're evolving with these issues that continue for 40, 50 years. And do I see a resolution on the near horizon? No, I don't. So is that a real sea change? Maybe a sea change is around just beyond the horizon. But when it comes to gun control, I see, again, a slow moving evolution of change. And we've had 114 shootings since Columbine. We've had over 1,400 people murdered by lone shooters or gunmen.
How about yesterday in South Carolina? The one every day, it looks like.
Yeah, actually, I think it's now 116 since I last said 114. Yeah. And the outrage is outrage, but we're numb. We've become desensitized to it as a society. And I think one of the first things Joe Biden said this morning was, look at what I'm proposing as far as some simple changes, reasonable changes to gun ownership. These are not an abridgment to the Second Amendment. And that's a false argument. And please don't perceive what I'm proposing as a direct attack on the Second Amendment. And that came out of his mouth right away, first off, because he had to say that because the GOP has been quite successful to convince Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, that any kind of rational gun control, reasonable gun control, is their attempts to take away all your weapons, all your guns, and an infringement on the Second Amendment rights. And so that has to be broken. That perception needs to be transformed, if you will.
Well, don't you think it's a possibility that it will be? I mean, for example, South Carolina, Boulder, Colorado, Texas, you name it. I mean, it's like all over the country, and it's random, and it's like every day, and it's like, the bullets do not distinguish between Republicans and Democrats. I mean, anybody can start having fear over being shot down and killed.
Yeah. But here's what I think, Jay. Here's what I think. I don't think it's anything about the Second Amendment anymore. It's become an effective political wedge issue for the GOP. And they've been using it for 40 years successfully to, again, wrangle people together on a cultural issue. And guns are cultural.
Yeah.
And until we address that, it's not really a gun control issue. It's a political wedge issue.
Well, if the public changes, if the public evolves somewhere else, the GOP is not going to be able to stand on that platform point. There's an argument here, the possibility that it is going to be short-lived. Let's take a moment and look at that commentary that was posted on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll just look at a few seconds of it. Okay, well, that's just the smattering of it. But, my thought, and I'd be interested in your thoughts, Stephanie, is that people in general, the person on the street, even the Republican, can't tolerate this going forward because that person could be shot just as well.
Well, exactly. I think, as we've talked about this before, it's just Dodge City, the OK Corral. I mean, we're going to be walking around just like everybody was on those streets in front of those wooden front storefronts. But it's just really, truly scary, and will take its toll on our international standing, I think, and people are not going to come here if their lives are so threatened. But I was interested.
That's what Joe Biden said this morning, didn't he? It's an embarrassment for the United States in the eyes of people overseas.
And the horrible thing I found out or learned about bankruptcy, which is what that National Rifle Association is in now, which I had celebrated privately because I thought it meant that they were coming down. But it turns out that the bankruptcy filing, as you must know, Jay, it stops all other actions against you. So it's actually a protection. And so LaPierre, the leadership, has said, don't worry, we're not in disarray here, and we're not in deficit, got plenty of money, everything. Don't worry, we're going forward. So they're using it like the Republicans, those people on the other side of things seem to use everything. They find the place where it works for their purposes, not for the rule.
Well, it's a strategic bankruptcy. It's a scam. They're not really qualified to be bankrupt, but they want to escape that suit by Letitia James in New York to dissolve them as a New York corporation and to hold their leadership responsible. So it happens that the bankruptcy courts get suits like that, bankruptcy cases like that. And you know what? The judges have the discretion to dismiss those cases. And that may be exactly what happens in the NRA.
Okay, that's very encouraging. And then the egregiousness of the leadership and their treatment of themselves, these 110-foot yachts and very expensive wife context for makeup and hair, and I mean all kinds of just unbelievably stupid investments of people's hard-earned money who think they're doing.
Well, do you think it's going to reach the public? And do you think the public has, this is the point that Tim was raising. Do you think the public has any real influence on guys like Mitch McConnell? Or is he going to stand fast and stop any gun control measure?
I think it might soak through, but Fox is doing everything it can. I'm noticing some shifts. They're doing everything they can to look more analytic and more even and more reasonable. For instance, on the laws about voting, restricting voting. There's some very interesting reports that are fairly well done, comparing all the states' requirements for voting. And in some ways, if they hadn't been so stupid as to include the food and water part of it, they would be able to slither around under the bar even better. But even with that egregious prohibition for lineup voters, they're still trying to make it all make sense to the public. But I heard that the Fox viewership is declining. So there are all these things at work, and hopefully.
Well, that's a sea change too, isn't it? I mean, Trump isn't there. He's not on Twitter, although he has some kind of lawsuit about that. And things could be changing if he's not around, and his base can't connect with him and get invigorated by him. Things are changing every day. I think things are changing. One of the things about gun control is that Joe Biden is supposed to issue an executive order, I think today, I don't know if he has yet, to do gun control on a proclamation basis. And that would be encouraging.
Well, the best encouragement there that I had was that he sees the importance of inserting the liability for the Smith & Wesson and Remington and other gun manufacturers. They can be sued. So they're totally protected right now, even if they have a defective product, without even much manipulation. They cannot be touched for anything. So he's going to, I think he might have some success in getting that through.
And we see the sea change there is that these proclamations, as Trump showed us, have have a life of their own. They have momentum. They carry on into the next administration. They don't go away like that. Biden is trying to take apart the proclamations that Trump made, just as Trump tried to reverse everything Obama did. But I think we're finding out that some proclamations actually stay. They have legs. And maybe his gun control proclamations will have legs. Winston, could you be optimistic about some of the suggested things that may be happening? I mean, for example, Biden's thing about facing down the GOP in Congress. Well, for the moment, it doesn't look like that's having much effect. And frankly, this guy, who's the Democrat who doesn't want to go along with Biden on anything?
Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin is really standing in the way. But I get the feeling that maybe after a time when Joe Biden is, reasonable and moderate, willing to talk, this is going to have an effect on the legislative process. And Mitch McConnell may not be able to hang on to his power role forever, because the people out there in the streets can see it's not doing anybody any good. What do you think?
I think you're very optimistic today, and I don't know. What's in the water? I don't know. I'm kind of taken off guard, so I'm going to say I'm going to go with your optimism, Jay. It's contagious. The Republicans, they just polled, 49% of people said they were Democrat or lean Democrat, and only 40% now for Republicans or lean Republican. And I think 25% put them in the definite Republican category. So their numbers are shrinking, and they realize they got to do something different. Our country, as far as is it on the right path? It seems to be jerking in fits and starts. You got the left giving, and then the right slapping. So you got these laws against, insane ones against these trans kids. So North Carolina, these kids, if you're a social worker and the child in your care could be a teacher, I suppose, if you're deviating from gender norms. So if you're a girl that gets a pixie cut or wants to, join, learn how to play chess or God knows what, then it's required that they report them to the government. Iowa, same thing. They have banned treatments for kids, and this is a decision between your doctors. But if you're looking at the speed of change, Europe, and you're focusing on these issues of gender identity, these concepts weren't really even existing 20 years ago. It's part of what fueled Donald Trump rising, because people felt like their world as they understood it was going, and indeed it is. Maybe it never was there, but
is the world of Donald Trump sustainable?
It's not sustainable, and but what's taking its place, we don't know. And we just, like Tim said, change is the only constant. We got to dive into the unknown. But I was heartened by, and I don't know if he was just naively occupying a space of America, like I think Tim and I have sort of advocated for. But Joe Manchin had a column in the Washington Post today, and he said specifically, I have said before, and I will say it again, that to remove any shred of doubt, there is no circumstance in which I will vote to eliminate or weaken the filibuster. The time has come to end these political games and to usher a new era of bipartisanship where we find common ground on the major policy debates facing our nation. And he mentions about Harry Reid in 2013 eliminating the filibuster for cabinet level nominees and federal judges. And I had mentioned that a month or so ago. And I thought, yeah, this is a mistake. And then, of course, McConnell did it for Supreme Court judges, and we can see where that's gone. So Joe's idea is that we need to come back to the center, and I think he's right, but it may be naive, and I don't know. But since you're optimistic today, I'm going to be optimistic too. Also, what our very good president said now about his infrastructure plan, says debate is welcome, compromise is inevitable, changes are certain, Biden said. He added that he would soon invite Republican lawmakers to the White House and that the administration is open to good ideas and good faith negotiations. When was the last time you heard that coming out of the president's mouth? Not this president, but we waited 4 years.
Over a period of time, Winston, if he keeps on doing that, and the GOP is intransigent on it, and whatever press you want to talk about, that is feeding into the public conversation. Don't you think that the base will shrink even more? So what kind of thing is this? They don't want to talk. This is not rational.
One would hope so, but I was, reading about the QAnon stuff, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has a 30% of GOP voters viewing her favorably. She's just grown in popularity. And remember, this is the lady that thinks that Hillary Clinton is part of a cannibalistic, sex trafficking, blood drinking of children.
I think she's an offshoot of Trump. I think this irrationality all came from Trump.
She's an offshoot of crazy and angry, and I don't think she actually believes that stuff, Jewish space lasers and all of that. I think that she's just been, one of the people that's sucked in by, it's not even tabloid level news. It's the same people that are thinking there's chips in the vaccines, and
so you think this is going to continue, that there really is no...
That will continue, undoubtedly. America's always had its space and place for lunacy. It just wasn't in the mainstream political parties as it is today. But when you're so silent in your news sources, that's what happens. But as you said, if Joe Biden continues down this plan, and you get the Joe Manchins that say, look, Republicans of conscience, we actually need to go back to this thing, or the wheels are just going to come off, not just for you, but for all of us, then maybe we do have a chance here. And I'm optimistic with you today.
Okay, well, I'm happy to be, at least for this discussion, within the bubble of your optimism. It's good.
I think I'm within the bubble of your optimism.
Okay, so. Fair enough. So, Tim, we have racism in this country. And I suggest to you that, it wasn't just the killing of George Floyd last May that, created all the tumult on the streets and exacerbated the racism and racial conscience of various groups in the country. It's been cooking for a long time. But my question to you is, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel? Are we going to be in a forever contentious mode over racism? Is there a chance that we'll find our way here? America finding its way? Do you have any level of optimism about that? Do you think that people out there, and on both sides of the racist question, will find that it doesn't pay to be racist?
Well, you asked very tough questions, Jay. Here's my feeling. The George Floyd protests that took place this last summer were really helpful, because I think it reflected to white America that there just may be some built-in racism in the system itself. And why is that? Well, it's to preserve power for those that hold the power, and that in some police forces, racism is alive and well, and the implementation of excessive police force is it's commonplace. And I think that's what was illustrated, and that's what's come out. And that's why you're seeing initiatives to restrict some police tactics as they interact with people of the community. So that's a sea change, I think, that people are starting to acknowledge maybe there is racism inbred into the structure of government, and how government is implemented, and how the police forces implement laws. And the disparity between being treated as a white American versus a African American or a Latino American. So from that standpoint, I think it's very positive. But in my mind, racism is the symptom. It's not the ultimate problem. And the ultimate problem in my world, in my way of thinking, is the retainment of a power structure. And racism is a convenient way of holding that power to one's chest. And that's the real issue, is this intense desire to retain power. And somehow power is going to have to be shared. And we're going to have to do, if we're a democracy, that is what democracy is all about.
Would you agree with me that Trump exacerbated racism in these United States, and that with him there is greater racism, without him there is less?
Donald Trump did what successfully anyone could do with a wedge issue, and that's bring it and bubble it to the surface and engage people to polarize over that very issue. He's a master at it, of dividing people and populations, and he did a wonderful job at it, and now it lingers.
Okay. All right, Stephanie, we talked about this on Tim's show yesterday, and I want to pursue it a little bit. It's the change in corporate attitudes. When the Citizens United corporations found a way to channel secret money to political candidates, and now it's been opened up. It's been opened up in the context of Georgia and that cockamamie, statute they adopted in Georgia. And corporations have stood up for what they believe is the right thing. And there are various leaders, including Beto O'Rourke, for example, who are saying, hey, you guys did a good job in Georgia, but it was late. Now we're in Texas. You have to do it before the legislature passes the bill. We haven't seen this before. We haven't seen the corporations step up really at all. And we haven't seen leadership tell them they should be stepping up. Do you think this is a sustainable, direction? Is this going to continue? Can we be optimistic about this? Is it a sea change?
Let's see. Let's say it is. I mean, we're watching it emerge, and it's a nice antidote to the Citizens United issue, which now maybe corporate America is going to do something more than they've ever done before. I mean, I think they're, the Gates Foundation, all these other places are very philanthropic and do things for the benefit of people. I think that maybe we're going somewhere with this, and that the deep pockets of corporate America are the deepest. And so deeper than the federal, I guess nothing's deeper than the federal government, because they can always print the money and sell the bonds, but that's where the money is. So I've always thought that for education, there ought to be a lot more input. Hewlett Packard is one of the corporations that has been very good about that and giving away, computers and doing things for schools, but not enough. We need that other pocket to come in and boost up our institutions in America, especially education, and make sure that everybody is reading by the third grade, please, so that you can be out on the highway and read.
But take it a step further. One of the reasons these corporations are stepping up is they believe they need to have the support of the public, their consumers, their constituents, their stockholders, if you will. And they're afraid that if they don't step up, people have made them afraid that if they don't step up, they're going to pay a price at the bottom line. We talked about this yesterday. So what we have here is the influence of the press, of the media, bringing people together to express themselves and to say, Delta Airlines, you better clean it up, or we're going to be flying United. Just as you mentioned the other day. And so it's not in a vacuum what these corporations are doing. They're doing it with due regard for what their consumers, constituents, stockholders are demanding they do. And those stockholders and consumers are coming together by virtue of the press. Is that a sea change?
That's a sea change, and I think it's meeting a deep, deep need of people in our country, which is, where do you go when you're between the rock and the hard place? Where do you go to get relief? I mean, Georgia's not got any relief. And some of the other states too, they're locked into gerrymandered districting and legislatures that are only thinking one way. What do you do? I mean, that's been the deplorable part of democracy for me. Well, I guess it's a misappropriation of democracy, because they work it so that people are in the hard place. Now we have another place we can go to. Is corporate America has its voice, as it's now a people person. So, I mean, now we've got them in the there to help out with our problem-solving negotiations. And also the news media are seeing that too, and directing people in that direction, and getting that information disseminated so that we do have another place to go. There's another lever here to use in this country to steer us back to our constitutional values.
Yeah. What do you say, Winston? Are we discovering new currents, new directions here?
All the time. America's moving towards a more perfect union over the course of its 400 years, and it has bumps in the road. Some of the bumps are bigger, some are slow it down, some try and reverse, but inevitably. And as far as corporations go, like we said, every single Fortune 500 corporation has a very extensive non-discrimination clause inside of it for hiring, whether it's, and it includes things as for things like genetic information, and certainly things like gender expression and identity. They all have that. So at this point, maybe it's just at race, gender, age, all of these things. Now it's the next logical step for them to take and say, okay, this is in your policies here. How are you implementing that? And if your workers and your customers don't have the right to vote, then they're not, at the end of the day, they want customers and they want workers that can read and write. So it's in their best interest to have an educated, wealthy, enfranchised workforce. So that's part of it. I'm looking here on the Google News. Caitlyn Jenner is looking to run for California governor under the Republicans. Tell me that's not a sea change, right? I mean, this is, you got a transgender lady who's a Republican unseating, Governor Handsome. It's remarkable. Talk about progress there.
Well, that couldn't happen unless there were a certain number of voters or constituents who thought it was okay, and and it was a reasonable move politically.
Exactly.
Let me ask you about leadership. I just want one other thing I'd like to talk to you about. It's leadership, and we talked yesterday about the Trump scam, and it was also the Republican candidates for Senate in Georgia did the same thing, and lots of Republican candidates have done this under his leadership. To have those what do you call it, money bomb check boxes pre-checked in the websites for campaign contributions, resulting in, the Washington Post did a masterful story on this, resulting in where a fellow wanted to give $100, he wound up giving thousands of dollars, unknowingly got nailed. And Trump held on to the money for 6 months and then gave it back when the storm of protest arose. Well, if you do the math and you realize you had to give something like $100 million back, there's a lot of people out there that got scammed, and they didn't like it. They complained about it. And when they complained, they were really bitter and sore that their money was taken away and not refunded for 6 months. Okay. So how are they going to vote next time? Now, some of them will undoubtedly see him as a religious icon, but others will be ticked off forever. And I suggest to you that kind of thing and the press it has had will affect his base. Do you think that when people realize that he's a scammer, that he always has been a scammer and he scammed them, and thus, all these dishonesty things affect them? He has come for them. He has taken their money, that they will stop supporting him. Do you think so? Is that a sea change?
Like to say that Don the con is gone, but I don't know that that's the case. And the old, I think, saying there that says, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So if you're giving money to this, and you know this, and you know that this is the way that they operate, and you do it again, we're getting back to some basic educational problems or you're so brainwashed by whatever that it doesn't really matter, and you just have to keep giving for your salvation or whatever it is that they hope to get out of it. So I think people are hopefully waking up. They're hopefully seeing this in some places. I'm seeing changes in our society. Absolutely. Joe Biden is the president now. I didn't wake up and wonder what he did. I don't think most people did. I don't follow him on Twitter because he doesn't. And if he did tweet, he's not going to put something. The biggest scandal to come out of his administration is the dog nipping at someone, and that's and he didn't break the skin. So there you go.
So Tim, what's the cumulative effect of all of this? I mean, yes, the change is constant. Yes, we're always in a change. And I guess it's something we've always at least referred to, if not explicitly discussed. And that is when you see all these things happening, what's the net effect? Is Trump and his friends, are they going to win in 2022? And I guess the bigger question is this, and this is exactly, to me, the core problem. Trump and his friends did a lot of things that are apparently hard to reverse. These Republican legislatures who are adopting really bad, awful bills, how do you fix that? Stephanie raised that question, and then it's a bleak landscape. How do you change that? You think you're going to go back to the state of Georgia, the legislature, and say, hey, guys, it's time to repeal that? It's not so clear that it'll be reversed in time for the 2022 election. I mean, can we be optimistic about the fact that some of these things are hard to change, and that even if we have a sea change, it won't be realized in time?
Donald Trump did open Pandora's box, no two ways about it. And he's, again, as I said about racism, he's been quite successful at it. I think, will 2022 be a Republican landslide? The answer is yes, if Democrats sit on their thumbs. It will be. But what can be done about it? Well, I'm a big believer in that voter rights law, HD1, excuse me, HD1 and S1. That can pass. It takes courage, it takes determination, and it's going to take some modification and revision of the filibuster. And Joe Manchin's going to have to realize that. And Joe Manchin will understand it once he sees once and for all that the Republicans aren't interested in really sitting down and becoming a centrist party again. They're not interested in negotiating the infrastructure bill. They may say they are, but it's a stall tactic, and it's a stall tactic to get us to 2022. Joe Manchin, I think maybe he's starting to realize that. I think he's a little bit optimistic about what the Republicans will do, but we'll see. So the answer is yes, those laws can be changed, and it's going to take a national law. I don't think corporations alone will solve the problem by pulling their support. This is going to have to take something bigger and larger, and something that will not be an executive order that can be reversed with the next president, but something that's going to have to go through the legislation, through Congress, and get passed and signed off by Joe Biden.
Okay, time for last comments. Stephanie, you've been listening to this. It's going in 5 directions. Where do you come down? Where do you come down on all this?
I think that it's been come down on by Rachel Maddow. She said in her program the other night that, hey, thanks, Mitch. We're glad to know it's no. You're not going to do anything. It's good you told us that here at the outset. So that's done. Let's move on. So if something like that doesn't communicate to Manchin, the direct marching orders to all of those folks. Okay, and the other comment I wanted to make is that for the Georgia situation, I think we still have a shoe to drop from Augusta, Georgia, and whether they're going to hold that match there. If they're going to do anything about that big golf match, that'll be a big statement one way or the other about the situation in Georgia. I notice it's kind of dropped out of the press a little bit now, but they'll be back.
It works, yeah. Yeah, but the one thing about gun control is it will not drop out of the press. I think we can sit here and guarantee each other that within the next day or two, there'll be another one. Is that, what can we do about that? Where does that fit? It's hard to realize the irrationality of not doing gun control. But anyways, Winston, what are your last thoughts?
Mass shooting just announced in Bryan, Texas, so it's not going anywhere.
Wait a minute, didn't we just have one yesterday?
This was 9 minutes ago. uh, on CNN. So it's active shooter. It says 21 minutes ago on Fox 13 News Utah. So I don't know if it's still going on or not, but it's not going anywhere. Um, we have such serious problems in this nation. I think I'm with Stephanie. It starts with the kids. Let's get them the best education in the world that they can get so that they're prepared to meet the full challenges in front of them on all levels, whether it's political,
but Winston,
social, economic.
Stephanie, it takes 10 years, maybe 15 or 20 to
15
actually
years.
educate.
You got to plant the seeds right now.
Does that
Korea
mean we
did
have to
it.
suffer through this for 15 years?
Korea did it. Singapore did it. We got to start now because these kids they literally are the future. And when they can't compete on the world stage, when they don't know that the Holocaust happened, when they can't name any of the branches of government, you know, we got serious problems. We got to start with the next generation because what we got right now, it ain't working either. So, but with the children, at least we have a chance. So if they can pour some money into education, let's follow the Singapore, let's follow the way that, not all the way that the Koreans do it, the Finns are at the top of public school education. They seem to do it right. So let's look at what Finland did, try and copy it, take the best from the rest of the world. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We just need to borrow it.
Stephanie, you wanted to add something to that.
This is not a homogeneous gene pool where everybody's got the same DNA. Come on, we've got a mix of people here, so we have to solve the problem ourselves and certainly learn from other models and bring them in. But this is a highly complicated act. In addition to having oppressed all of these people and kept them from education and having to do all that kind of work, it's a tremendous job. But let's start it now. I agree with you because. You know what? It just like with the Islamic situation and militarists and terrorists, you're not going to take them to a workshop and change those beliefs and values. Those are tectonic mental plates, and that takes generations. Yes, it's going to take a long time. Those guys at the Capitol, attacking the Capitol, the workshop or the work camp or the renovation camp. It's not going to change them.
Okay, we got to go back to Tim for his last words. Tim, this is complex. What are your thoughts to close? What do you want to leave people with on this?
I have to run because the police are after me. You can hear the siren coming. Hey, President Biden said two very important things today. And one is that gun control is not an infringement on the Second Amendment. Number two is that we're in a public health crisis with all these mass shootings. So he introduced very simple concepts, reasonable, sound solutions to some of our problems with the guns. And that is the ghost laws, the ghost gun laws, which is to say you can assemble a gun and the parts are void of all serial numbers. So you want serial numbers on all gun parts so that you can't just assemble and have these guns referred to as ghost guns. And second is red flag laws across the nation, which is to say, if you have a family member or friend that is acting very strange and owns an arsenal of weapons, that maybe the police can't intercede legally to maybe temporarily hold those guns for that individual until the crisis is resolved or dissipated. So these are two very sound, reasonable things to ask for, and they're not an infringement on your right to own and bear arms.
Yeah, well, that it just goes to the Constitution, doesn't it? And the Constitution has to be flexible, but it also goes to the social compact in which we are all members, and we all have to come together. And I think Donald Trump has done a lot to exacerbate the separation of groups. And so we all have to, swear to come together and be a country again. I'm not sure if I feel optimistic or pessimistic, but I sure like to identify sea changes. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Winston. A great discussion. See you next week. Aloha.
Aloha.